There's a strange, almost hypnotic quality to scrolling through an app like Temu. You see a portable blender for the price of a sandwich, a set of wireless earbuds for less than a movie ticket.
Yeah, it really does feel like you've stumbled upon some kind of glitch in the global economy, doesn't it?
Exactly. A secret marketplace where the normal rules of cost and value have, just been suspended just for you.
And that feeling, that sense of outsmarting the system, getting a deal that feels genuinely too good to be true, it's a powerful lure.
But what if that impossibly low price isn't a glitch, but a weapon? In a quiet government office in Germany, regulators are looking at that same $3 gadget and seeing something entirely different.
They're not seeing a bargain for the consumer.
No. They see a leash around the seller. They've just launched a formal investigation based on the suspicion that buried deep in the terms and conditions is a rule that effectively forbids sellers from offering their products cheaper anywhere else.
Suddenly, that feeling of a good deal starts to look more like a market being held hostage.
And your innocent purchase becomes Exhibit A in a case about what happens when prices are so low they might actually be illegal.
And that, right there, captures the central tension of our deep dive today. Our mission is to unpack two parallel and absolutely crucial regulatory actions unfolding in Europe right now.
Okay.
These actions, originating in Berlin and Brussels, are setting a critical precedent. They're really going to define how global platforms interact with the stringent, value-based EU legal framework.
So we have the German antitrust probe that runs specific investigation into pricing autonomy and those alleged seller restrictions, the leash you mentioned.
Precisely. And running concurrently, we have the EU Commission's comprehensive investigation under the Digital Services Act, the DSA,
Right.
which is focused much more broadly on platform responsibility, ethical design, systemic risk mitigation, that sort of thing. We are watching the birth of a new operational blueprint.
Okay, so for you, the listener, what's the key takeaway here? What should you be watching for?
You need to realize that these dual pressures, antitrust on one side, systemic regulation on the other, are establishing a new non-negotiable compliance requirement for any global company aiming for market dominance within the European single market.
So this fundamentally affects not just where you shop, but how these massive platforms must adapt to survive, really, in the EU.
Absolutely. It's about survival and the cost of doing business here.
Okay, let's unpack this then, starting with Germany. This isn't a small market for this platform, is it? We're talking about 19.3 million active Temu users there.
No, it's huge. That's a significant piece of the European pie, definitely.
So what specific allegation triggered the Federal Cartel Office, the Bundeskartellamt, to open this formal inquiry? What was the flashpoint?
Well, the inquiry targets Wellico Technology Limited, which is the Dublin-based subsidiary running things in Europe.
Hey.
And the core issue, as cited by President Andreas Mundt, isn't that the prices are low. Low prices are often great for consumers, right? But it's that the platform imposes, and this is the key phrase, inadmissible requirements on sellers concerning their pricing outside the platform.
Inadmissible requirements. Okay, that sounds like legal jargon for putting up a fence around their own marketplace. What's the real-world consequence that German authorities are worried about? What are they trying to prevent?
They're looking at the health of the entire market ecosystem. The concern is, if the platform mandates that its price must always be the lowest, then sellers have basically no incentive to compete or offer better deals elsewhere.
Like on their own website, maybe?
Yeah.
Or a rival platform?
Exactly. Say on their own site or on eBay or Amazon. The seller is essentially forced to raise their prices on every other channel just to comply with this platform's cap.
Oh, okay. So it kills off genuine price competition between the different marketplaces.
Precisely. The consequence authorities fear is limited fair competition, which ultimately, paradoxically, leads to an artificially higher price structure across the rest of the digital landscape. It kind of insulates the dominant platform.
But let's play devil's advocate for a moment, because this is where the popular argument for these platforms usually lands. Wouldn't the platform argue that guaranteeing the lowest price is actually good for the end consumer? Ensuring efficiency, transparency.
And that is the precise tension, isn't it? It's at the heart of modern antitrust law.
Yeah.
While guaranteed low prices seem consumer-friendly in the short term, the regulatory concern is the long-term structural damage. If a platform can use its market power to stop sellers from competing freely elsewhere, it suffocates innovation and investment on competing platforms.
Okay.
And more critically, it challenges the fundamental legal principle of seller autonomy. In European law, the seller must have the right to autonomously value their own work, their own products. If the platform dictates that value across the entire market, well, that independence is lost.
Where did the specific details of this alleged restriction actually come from? What was the leash they supposedly put on the sellers? How tight was it?
So the investigation formally stems from a complaint lodged back in April 2025. It came from Germany's Retailers Trade Association, the HDE.
Okay, the HDE.
And the HDE alleged that the platform caps merchant prices. They claimed sellers were specifically instructed not to exceed 85% of prices listed on competing platforms.
85%. Wow. That is an incredibly specific and, well, aggressive alleged restriction, isn't it?
It really is.
So if a small business sells their handcrafted soap for, say, €10 on their own little web shop, this platform is allegedly demanding they sell it for €8.50 less there, effectively forcing them to constantly undercut their own valuation everywhere else.
Exactly. That's the core of the allegation, and it reportedly goes further.
Yeah.
The platform is also accused of reserving the right to intervene directly in pricing, ultimately determining the final retail prices themselves, regardless of what the merchant wanted as their minimum.
Whoa. So that transforms the platform from just being a marketplace, a venue,
into something much closer to a quasi-retailer, dictating prices across the whole digital ecosystem. This move, if it's confirmed, shifts control over market dynamics entirely away from the independent seller and concentrates it completely within the platform's infrastructure.
This alleged practice sounds a lot like what competition lawyers call price parity clauses, or most favored nation, MFN-style restrictions. Can you elaborate a bit? Are all MFNs bad in the eyes of regulators?
Sure. An MFN clause basically just says that the customer, in this case, the platform, must get the best available terms from the supplier, the seller.
Okay.
Traditionally, a narrow MFN clause might restrict a seller from offering a better price on their own direct website. Now, even those have faced scrutiny in Europe.
Right.
But the German investigation seems to be targeting what's known as a wide MFN clause, and those are much more problematic under current EU competition rules.
Okay, so what makes it a wide MFN clause in this context? What's the difference?
A wide MFN clause restricts the seller's pricing freedom on competing third-party platforms. So, allegedly telling a seller, you cannot price your product cheaper on Amazon or eBay or anywhere else than you do here, that's a wide MFN. It's seen as a direct attack on inter-platform competition.
Because if every big marketplace did that.
Exactly. If every major marketplace imposes a wide MFN, competition basically ceases to be about price. It shifts only to non-price factors like, shipping speed or how nice the interface looks. You effectively end up with a cartelized price structure across the digital landscape. That's the legal principle at stake here. It's a fundamental challenge to the idea of a truly competitive European digital single market.
Let's try and bring this home a bit. Thinking about those small businesses who rely on this platform for access, but might now be subject to these rules. You mentioned a craftsman in Bavaria. Let's call him Stefan, making bespoke leather wallets. How does this play out for him?
Stefan's story, it illustrates this dynamic perfectly. So he sells his artisan wallets for, say, €80. Gaining access to this massive platform meant incredible visibility. Suddenly, he could ship dozens of wallets globally every week. It was like a dream come true, a mass market opening up.
Okay.
But the alleged cost was his pricing autonomy. When he apparently tried to raise the price on his own high-end website to €90 maybe to reflect the smaller transaction fees there, or the direct customer service on the offers, he reportedly received algorithmic warnings from the platform, like automated flags.
So he was basically being penalized for trying to differentiate his brand experience outside of the platform's strict control.
Exactly. He got the market access he needed, but the price he paid, allegedly, was the loss of control over his own pricing and his brand's value proposition. He was forced into a race to the bottom, constantly having to undermine his own premium brand identity just to meet the terms dictated by the platform.
So the platform's algorithm essentially demanded he compete against himself, forcing him to keep the price across all channels anchored to whatever lowest price they dictated.
That's the allegation. He became trapped, reliant on the platform for sales volume, but unable to really invest in the future of his own independent brand because his margins were just too aggressively compressed by these rules.
What's really fascinating here is how that promise of massive market access, which, let's be honest, is undeniably crucial for small businesses today, can be conditioned on sacrificing these fundamental seller rights, rights which seem pretty central to European competition law thinking.
That's the critical insight, yes. The BKA, the German authority, is looking at this systemic conditioning, not just one isolated low price.
Right.
The principle the BKA is defending isn't just against cheapness itself, but against the concentration of power that allows one single entity to potentially determine the competitive landscape for everyone else. Now, for the record, the platform maintains that they comply with all local laws and regulations, and they've expressed confidence that these concerns can be successfully resolved.
Okay.
But this pricing probe is highly focused, and it's just one part of the picture. Now, we need to shift gears and look at the second, much broader regulatory action, the DSA. Okay, so if we connect this German probe to the bigger picture, it's running alongside this much broader systemic review by the European Commission under the Digital Services Act, or DSA.
Right.
The German investigation is very specific about market conduct, pricing. The DSA, that's about the platform's fundamental architecture and its responsibility to society as a whole. It's a different beast.
And this was triggered simply because they got so big in Europe, right? They crossed a really important line in terms of user numbers.
They absolutely did. The platform was formally designated as a very large online platform, a VLOP, back on May 31st, 2024.
VLOP status.
Okay. That status gets triggered when a platform confirms it has over 45 million monthly active users within the EU. That's the magic number. It signifies the platform is large enough that its operations could pose systemic risks to the European digital landscape.
And that VLOP designation isn't just a fancy label, is it? It immediately triggers the most stringent rules under the DSA. What was the compliance deadline, and what are the sort of general obligations that come with it?
They had until the end of September 2024 to get fully compliant with all the VLOP obligations. And the core task is immense. They have to conduct and report annual systemic risk assessments.
Okay.
And then, crucially, they have to demonstrably mitigate those risks. Risks related to illegal content, IP infringement, protection of minors, you name it. Mitigation means implementing complex, expensive, and auditable internal systems. It's a huge operational mandate to change how they fundamentally function.
But the Commission clearly wasn't entirely satisfied with the platform's initial response, or maybe their risk assessment report, because they opened formal proceedings pretty soon after that deadline, didn't they?
That's right. Formal proceedings were opened on October 31st, 2024. This followed some preliminary analyses and, importantly, information shared by third parties, notably the Irish Digital Services Coordinator, since the European HQ is in Dublin.
Oh, okay.
Opening formal proceedings signifies a serious escalation. The Commission has specific concerns across 4 key areas that suggest the platform might not be fully complying with its systemic risk obligations under the DSA. Let's break those down, because they really reveal the EU's vision for how these huge platforms should be governed.
Okay, let's start with the first one. Illegal and non-compliant products. What specifically are they looking for there? It's more than just taking down dodgy listings, I assume.
Oh, much more. The DSA requires a rigorous notice and action mechanism, yes. So the Commission is definitely scrutinizing the platform systems for preventing the sale of illegal goods, think counterfeits, dangerous electrical items, products that violate mandatory EU safety standards.
Right.
But the deeper concern, the thing that seems to be driving the formal proceedings, is about rogue traders. Specifically, how effectively the platform prevents the reappearance of sellers who have already been suspended for peddling non-compliant goods.
So it's not enough to just take down one bad listing. They have to stop the source from popping up again under a different name.
Exactly. These rogue traders are often masters of evasion. They'll use slightly different company names, new email addresses, maybe different corporate registrations, anything to immediately get back on the platform after being banned. The Commission is assessing if the platform's internal compliance mechanisms, their vetting processes, payment checks, the technical systems that track and block previous identifiers are genuinely robust enough to halt this kind of systematic evasion. They want proof the platform is spending serious money and resources to protect consumers from repeat offenders, rather than just playing whack-a-mole with individual bad listings.
That sounds like a massive technological and operational undertaking.
Yeah.
Requires some pretty sophisticated identity verification, I imagine. Okay, let's move to the second area, which is maybe the most ethically interesting: addictive design. This is where the interface itself, how the app works, becomes the focus of regulatory scrutiny.
Yeah, this really raises an important question about the ethics of engagement, doesn't it?
It does.
The focus is on risks stemming from the service's design itself, particularly the game-like reward programs, all those gamified features that encourage intense and potentially compulsive user behavior. The DSA isn't just about what you buy, it's about how the platform might be manipulating your attention and your intent.
We've all seen these features, haven't we? The spin-to-win wheels, the mandatory daily check-ins to unlock a slightly better coupon, the flash sale countdown timers that pop up and create this false sense of urgency. Are those specific tactics now under the microscope?
They are absolutely on the radar. The Commission is looking at these features as potential drivers of addictive behavior.
Okay.
For instance, the algorithms often employ things like loss aversion tactics, telling you must act now or you'll lose out on this amazing discount. That can lead to impulsive spending, maybe buyer's remorse later.
Yeah.
They're assessing whether this gamification causes negative consequences for a person's physical and mental well-being. Could it lead to compulsive shopping habits, excessive screen time, or even financial stress driven purely by these urgency mechanisms? The underlying principle is that the design must be transparent and safe, not engineered purely for maximum engagement at the potential cost of user welfare.
It really redefines platform responsibility, doesn't it? From being a sort of passive host to being an active architect of user behavior. Okay, what is the third area of scrutiny?
The third area deals with recommender systems transparency. Platforms like this succeed by showing you exactly what they think you want to see.
Right. The algorithm knows best.
Yeah.
Or thinks it does.
Well, the DSA mandates that this whole process must be transparent. So the Commission is assessing compliance with the requirement to disclose the main parameters used in their product recommendation algorithms.
So if an item is recommended to me because I looked at a similar item yesterday, that's one parameter they'd need to disclose. But if it's recommended because, say, a seller paid a premium to boost its visibility, that parameter must be clearly disclosed too, correct?
Precisely. Transparency means users need to understand why they are seeing what they see. But the compliance requirement goes even further, and this is really crucial. The platform must provide users with at least one easily accessible option for recommendations that is not based on profiling.
Wow. Okay, that sounds like a major technical obligation. It means giving the user a truly neutral, non-algorithmic view of the products. That seems to force the platform to fundamentally alter how it presents its entire inventory. How would a non-profiled option even work on a platform built on hyper-personalization?
It's a challenge, no doubt. It would probably involve offering filters based on simple non-personal parameters, maybe purely chronological listings of new products, perhaps alphabetical order by brand, or categories based on random selection rather than predicted preference.
And why? What's the goal behind mandating that?
The why behind this mandate is really about preventing hidden algorithmic manipulation. It's about allowing users to escape the constant data treadmill and the filter bubbles created by personalization. It essentially grants the user more digital autonomy by allowing them to browse something closer to a genuine marketplace, not just a heavily curated, hyper-targeted feed designed to maximize sales.
Okay, that makes sense. And finally, the fourth area. Researcher data access. Why is granting researchers access to platform data so important within the DSA framework? Seems a bit technical.
It might seem technical, but it's actually a critical check and balance mechanism. VLOPs are obligated under the DSA to grant vetted researchers access to their publicly accessible data.
Why? What do the researchers do with it?
Because these researchers are independent experts who can study the very systemic risks that the platforms themselves claim they are mitigating. They act as an essential external compliance check. They can verify the platform's own self-reported risk assessments regarding everything from the spread of illegal content to the real-world effects of their recommender systems or addictive design features.
So if the platform blocks or unduly delays access to the required data,
it immediately suggests an unwillingness to allow external validation of its compliance claims, which is in itself a core breach of DSA accountability principles. It raises a huge red flag for the regulators.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We're talking about massive operational overhauls, huge compliance costs, and these serious regulatory threats hitting them all at once. The stakes are huge, aren't they?
Yeah.
Especially when you look at the potential financial penalties.
The stakes are enormous. Non-compliance, particularly for a VLOP, could lead to fines reaching up to 6% of the company's global annual turnover.
6%. Global.
Yes. To grasp the gravity of this, if we consider the global scale and the rapid growth of the parent company, PDD Holdings, 6% of turnover represents potentially multi-billion-dollar penalties. This is not just a slap on the wrist.
Okay.
Furthermore, a finding of serious non-compliance, particularly around things like illegal products or proven addictive design harms, could severely damage consumer trust. It could cause significant operational and reputational setbacks to its European expansion efforts, potentially even forcing a complete regulator-mandated overhaul of its entire EU business model. The pressure is immense. And these two things, the German antitrust probe and the EU-wide DSA investigation, they're independent, legally distinct processes, but they are absolutely mutually reinforcing. They paint a picture of intense scrutiny.
Right.
And the outcome of the German case in particular, the pricing one, that's likely to establish a very concrete, pragmatic precedent for the entire EU single market. It could become a kind of blueprint for enforcement against these rapidly expanding cross-border e-commerce platforms.
Why does the German Federal Cartel Office, the Bundeskartellamt, carry such weight? Why would regulators in, say, Spain or France or Italy look so closely at what happens in Berlin?
Well, the Bundeskartellamt has a long history of being proactive and extremely detailed in its enforcement of competition law, particularly when it comes to digital markets. They were pioneers in prosecuting abuse of dominance cases against large tech platforms years ago.
Okay.
So their finding in this specific case, whether they ultimately determine that the platform's alleged conduct amounts to an abuse of dominance under Article 102 of the EU treaty, or perhaps a restrictive agreement under Article 101, that finding will provide a very clear legal template.
So the lawyer in Berlin, let's keep calling him Klaus, as in your analogy, he's essentially writing a handbook for his counterparts across Europe on how to tackle this specific issue.
Precisely. Klaus's work, his detailed analysis, sets the standard. Regulators in Madrid, Paris, Rome, they will look very closely at the BKA's economic analysis, the methodology they used to prove the existence of that alleged wide MFN clause, and how they calculated the resulting market harm. This kind of share enforcement strategy drastically accelerates the pace at which the next high-growth platform that might try similar aggressive tactics can be investigated and potentially sanctioned across Europe. It's drawing a clearer map for the future of Europe's digital single market.
Let's try and anchor this specific German allegation, that 85% price cap rollback, into the high-level EU legal framework. You mentioned the vertical block exemption regulation, or VBER. This regulation was updated fairly recently, specifically to deal with platform power, correct?
That's absolutely correct. The VBER update, which came into force in 2022, was a major modernization effort. It was aimed squarely at governing distribution agreements in the digital age, particularly the relationship between platforms and the businesses that sell on them.
And the goal was?
The goal was to remove certain types of anti-competitive restrictions from the protection of a safe harbor exemption. Basically, certain practices were previously presumed okay unless proven otherwise. Now, some are presumed problematic unless justified. It makes them subject to full scrutiny under Article 101 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, TFEU, which prohibits anti-competitive agreements.
And the specific practice Temu is being investigated for in Germany, restricting sellers from offering better terms on competing platforms. Is that exactly one of those restrictions that got explicitly excluded from the safe harbor?
Yes, it is. The new VBER rules explicitly state that these across-platform retail parity obligations, the wide MFN clauses we talked about, cannot benefit from the automatic block exemption anymore.
Okay.
The EU clearly recognizes that these wide obligations severely restrict inter-platform competition. Think about it. If Platform A makes it effectively illegal for a seller to offer a cheaper price on Platform B, then Platform B can never really compete properly on price. It eliminates one of the main drivers of market innovation and consumer benefit. So if the BKA confirms the HDE allegations regarding that 85% price cap, that practice immediately falls outside the VBER safe harbor and is subject to the full force of EU competition law as a potentially illegal restriction.
This whole situation really seems to reflect this immense challenge for non-EU tech giants, doesn't it? They often operate under this very rapid move fast and break things disruption ethos.
Yes.
And then they encounter Europe's much more measured, compliance-heavy culture.
It creates a fascinating clash of cultures, absolutely. Let's think about that young professional, maybe let's call him Chen, working on the European expansion team for a company like this. He's the human bridge between two vastly different
Thought
worlds.
so.
On one side, he faces intense pressure from headquarters for explosive market share growth, for disruption, for hitting targets at all costs. On the other side, he's dealing with European legal advisors who speak a different language, the language of compliance, data privacy, competition nuance, where the word disruption is often heard as potentially synonymous with market abuse.
And from his perspective, or the company's perspective, they might see this regulatory environment as simply protectionist barriers designed to slow them down, right? What's the nuanced regulatory counterargument to that view?
Well, while some in the industry certainly do view these rules as barriers, Europe generally views them as defining the foundational values of its market. It's about ensuring digital sovereignty, protecting seller autonomy, fostering domestic innovation by trying to level the playing field. Success in the EU single market requires more than just low prices and aggressive growth. It requires a deep, respectful understanding that the legal environment here prioritizes the long-term stability and fairness of the market structure, sometimes over immediate, unchecked expansion. It's fundamentally a compliance culture that often supersedes a pure disruption ethos. You have to play by the established rules.
Now, beyond the core pricing issue that the BKA is looking at, the German Trade Association, the HDE, also raised some other concerns about fair trade practices, things that relate more directly to the consumer experience. What were those other alleged breaches?
They raised two significant transparency issues, which also touch on the DSA concerns we discussed. First, there are allegations that the platform frequently fails to provide the mandatory 30-day best price information.
Ah, right. That's an EU rule designed to stop fake discounts, isn't it?
Exactly. If a product is advertised as, say, 50% off, the platform must clearly state what the lowest price for that item was in the 30 days before that discount started. Failure to do so misleads the consumer about the true value of the deal. It prevents the classic trick of jacking up the price for a day, then dropping it immediately and calling it a massive sale.
Okay, that makes sense. And the second concern?
The second concern relates directly back to the addictive design worries under the DSA, the alleged employment of misleading countdown timers during discount promotions.
Those flashing clocks.
Yeah.
Offer ends in 2 minutes.
Precisely. The HDE argues these are often purely psychological tactics, creating a sense of false scarcity designed simply to generate anxiety and pressure consumers into making immediate, impulsive purchases, rather than reflecting any genuine time constraint on the inventory or the offer. Both of these alleged practices would be breaches of existing fair trade rules designed to protect consumers from psychological manipulation and ensure transparency.
Finally, we really need to place all this scrutiny in a wider global context. Because this pressure isn't just building from European competition and consumer protection law, is it? It's also coming from trade policy, particularly things happening in the U.S.
Absolutely. The U.S. decision on tariffs and, critically, the suspension of the de minimis rule. This is potentially the existential threat to the entire ultra-low-cost cross-border e-commerce model.
Explain that de minimis rule again. How did that work?
So, de minimis rules exist in many countries. In the U.S., it previously allowed goods valued under $800 to be imported completely duty-free, often bypassing traditional stringent customs inspections and tariffs.
Okay, under $800, no duties.
Right. And platforms like Temu and Shein before it really optimized their logistics around this. By shipping hundreds of thousands, maybe millions, of small individual packages directly from manufacturers in China to individual consumers in the U.S., each valued under that $800 threshold.
They avoided the tariffs, taxes, and complex customs scrutiny that traditional American or European importers, like major retailers bringing in containers full of goods, always had to bear.
Exactly. This mechanism potentially saved these platforms billions in operational costs. It created a huge part of the massive price gap you see at checkout compared to traditional retail. It was a logistical foundation, arguably, of their aggressive pricing strategy.
So if the U.S. has now suspended that rule for certain imports, and you mentioned Germany is actively discussing eliminating its own duty-free allowance for low-value imports, that directly threatens the financial viability of the whole model, doesn't it?
It fundamentally does. It removes the key logistical loophole that enabled the bargain in the first place, or at least a significant part of it. The business model is highly optimized to exploit these cross-border direct shipping mechanisms. If Germany, or perhaps the wider EU eventually, were to eliminate duty-free imports under a certain threshold, which is often much lower than $800 in Europe anyway,
Right.
the cost structure would radically shift overnight. The platform would suddenly have to integrate tariffs, VAT collection at import, and standard customs compliance costs into its pricing, instantly eroding its margin advantage over domestic European retailers who already deal with all that. The pressure is really building from all sides now. Antitrust, systemic platform compliance under DSA, consumer protection rules, and now international trade policy. It's a perfect storm of regulatory attention. #tag outro.
So what does this all really mean at the end of the day? It seems like the seemingly simple, maybe even innocent act of finding a really cheap gadget online has triggered these two major parallel regulatory investigations. And they could fundamentally reshape how these massive global marketplaces are allowed to operate across the entire European Union.
That's right. The German probe is digging deep into the boundaries of fair competition and seller autonomy, the very structure of the market. While the DSA investigation is demanding sweeping systemic reform on safety, ethical design, and basic transparency.
It feels like more than just fines is at stake here.
Oh, absolutely. The decisions coming out of Germany's Federal Cartel Office in Bonn and from the European Commission in Brussels, they are doing much more than just potentially issuing fines, however large. They're actively defining the rules of the road for the future digital economy.
Rules covering a huge range.
Rules governing competition, yes, but also seller autonomy, the ethics of platform design, and fundamental consumer protection online. It underscores this core fact. In the European single market, massive, rapid growth is simply not enough. It must be coupled with meticulous, non-negotiable compliance with Europe's established legal order and its underlying cultural values around fairness and safety.
It sounds like a profound signal, really.
It is. It's a profound signal that the European Union intends to assert its digital sovereignty and ensure that even the largest global players operate according to its standards.
Thank you for diving deep with us into this really complex and evolving situation.
My pleasure. It's certainly a space to watch closely.